Welcome to Soundtrack Your Life, a podcast about soundtracks, music, and movies. Each episode features a guest and focuses on a specific soundtrack and the personal stories connected to it. Now here's your host, Ryan Pack.
Welcome to Soundtrack Your Life, the podcast where we talk about soundtracks and our personal connections to them. So we have a returning guest. He was on a few episodes back in season 1. He's also a bandmate of mine. He puts together the playlist for the website at www.soundtrackyourlife.net. Welcome back to the show, Damon Gross.
Hey, Ryan.
So, Damon, today we're going to talk about the 2001 Richard Kelly film, Donnie Darko. Why are we talking about Donnie Darko today?
That's a great film. I love that movie. I felt like Donnie Darko and its music, there's like a special place in time that I think that the Donnie Darko and the Donnie Darko soundtrack exists for me. There's some cool music in this movie, and I thought it would be fun to talk about it.
So Damon, Donnie Darko is obviously kind of this cult film now. So when did you hear about Donnie Darko? Did you hear about it when it first came out, or kind of on like the second wave where it became kind of a cult classic when it was re-released on like DVD?
I was thinking back on that, and I know I did see it in its original theatric release sometime. It must have been maybe in late 2001, early 2002. And I was living in Los Angeles at the time. I did see it on video later as well. It's all kind of a blur, really, but I know that yeah, 2001 was a crazy year. You know, I was thinking about this. Donnie Darko came out 19 years ago. It's set in 1988. And so at the time it came out, it was like set 12 years in the past. Ish, 12, 13 years.
Right.
And now, I mean, like 19 years ago, I don't know. I mean, have you seen the movie lately? I think it's aged pretty well. To me, it doesn't look to be 20 years out.
I think when I saw it, it was probably like 2007, 2008. I haven't seen it since then. But yeah, in 2008, I wasn't like, oh, this looks like, it's aged terribly from 2001. So I think, because I saw it so late, I'm pretty sure I saw the director's cut. So I find it fascinating that you actually saw the original version in theaters. Like, I feel like you may be the only person I've met who's seen the original Donnie Darko when it came out in its original run.
Oh, wow. Yeah. No, I mean, I used to go to movies back then. I was thinking back around this time, and I was looking back at the other movies that came out that year, and I'm like, Hedwig and the Angry Inch. I saw that in the theater. It seemed like I was going to the movies a lot in LA at that time. I really wish I could remember where I wanted to remember where I saw the movie. I would go to the Vista. I know I saw Harry Potter at the Vista in Los Angeles that year as well. But so like it was this funny thing the Vista would have. Vista, it's on Sunset. There used to be a Blockbuster Video across the street from it. It's on like Sunset in Vermont. It's still there, I believe. But I would go there, or there was another theater in somewhere in West Hollywood that I think there was like a Virgin Megastore directly adjacent to it, and it might have been there. I saw Ghost World that year too, and Henry Gibson was in line, famously from Laugh-In and Magnolia. I think he was in line with me. It could have been Donnie Darko that he was in line with me for if I did see it there. but I know it was that year. It was one of those movies. So I thought that was interesting. That was an interesting celebrity sighting. Yeah, the film soundtrack does resonate with me. It still does. The movie's set in 1988. It doesn't make me feel a particular sentimentality or nostalgia for the 1988 that I lived in. Donnie Darko is set in, I think, somewhere on the East Coast, but it's all shot in LA. I was living in the desert at the time in 1988. I went to a public school. He goes to a private school. Anyway, nevertheless, I feel that the use of the music in the film effectively pulls you into the past in a way that not a lot of films are able to do. With pop music, it's just a good use of sound and vision to me.
So I see one of the songs that you were a big fan of from the soundtrack is Echo and the Bunnymen's The Killing Moon, which was also famously covered by Pavement a few years before the movie came out.
So if you saw the director's cut, then you wouldn't have seen or heard The Killing Moon in Donnie Darko. What did so I think in the director's cut, the first song you hear in the movie, the original release, is The Killing Moon, as you mentioned, but I think that the director wanted a different song, and for licensing issues he couldn't get it, so for the director's cut he put in a different song. Do you know what it was?
Never Tear Us Apart by INXS.
Okay. Yeah, well, that fits for 1988, I guess. But
The Killing Moon later replaces Under the Milky Way during the party scene, says Wikipedia.
Okay. So they do end up using it. Either way, they use that song. Okay, Under the Milky Way. So I can picture Donnie Darko and I don't remember the character's name, so I'll say that Jake Gylenhaal plays Donnie Darko, and Jenna Malone are descending a staircase during his sister's party, and you hear Under the Milky Way by the church, I think, during that scene.
Mm-hmm.
So that is The Killing Moon instead. So they put The Killing Moon there. I've got to see the director's cut and see how that feels for that scene.
And The Killing Moon is a 1984 song.
Yeah. So I feel like The Killing Moon, like the music, a lot of the music in the movie feels like, the movie's called Donnie Darko, not, I don't know what his older sister. So I found that interesting, the older sister in the movie, if you haven't seen it, listeners out there, is played by real life older sister Maggie Gyllenhaal. And I feel like a lot of the music in the film seems to be like what maybe his sister would have been into a couple of years before. So the movie's set in 1988, and we're hearing like The Church and Tears for Fears, Duran Duran, Echo and the Bunnymen, stuff like that. Kind of feels to me like it might have been his sister's music, not his. But yeah, Tears for Fears were happening. But for me in 1988, if you're going to make a film about 1988, I'd be putting in some George Michael, some Guns N' Roses, maybe something like that. I don't know. But I don't think that George Michael and Guns N' Roses really would have fit the tone of the Donnie Darko movie.
I don't think so.
Yeah, no. There's I think it's a good melancholy synth pop kind of, synth pop sounds like I'm belittling the career of Echo and the Bunnymen, but that kind of melancholy synth pop kind of fits the tone of the movie, fits the proto fits the proto emo of Donnie Darko and his mental instability, I suppose.
It's kind of funny. So when I heard the Pavement cover of The Killing Moon, which I think was on like 97, 98 or something like that. So I bought a Echo and the Bunnymen like best of album that had The Killing Moon on it.
Yeah.
And I remember just being like so weirded out by Echo and the Bunnymen. I didn't realize they were such a different band before like they started getting like super new wavy with like Lips Like Sugar. Because I would be like, oh, I like that Lips Like Sugar song, and this Pavement version of Killing Moon is great, so I should really dive into Echo and the Bunnymen. And I think in the mid-90s they were trying to do like a career resurgence. And that best of, for one, the original version of the Killing Moon is pretty different than the Pavement version. Like melody-wise it's the same, but they have like those weird strings.
Oh yeah, I had the 12-inch of that. I remember. I don't know. I'm certain I had it sometime in between hearing the Pavement version. The first time I heard the Pavement version, I saw them at the Glass House in Pomona. Saw Pavement, not Echo and the Bunnymen. I saw Pavement at the Glass House in Pomona, and they played it. I didn't quite recognize it. I had intentionally avoided bands like Echo and the Bunnymen for most of the 90s due to my idea of kind of not thinking that, synthesizers and stuff like that was cool. So I avoided I avoided a lot of music like that, including The Cure and everything else, until a few years later. But I saw them play, and at some point I did acquire the 12-inch of The Killing Moon. I think on the B side it's like a 15-minute version or something like that.
Oh yeah, I saw that. It was like some alternate version. I forget what they called it. It was kind of funny.
So I don't recall the version that's in the so the version
it's
they
the
use in
all
Donnie
night
Darko.
version.
All night version. That's the one. Yes.
And it's 9 minutes and 11 seconds.
Okay, yeah, maybe 15 minutes is exaggerating, but I knew it was long I knew it was a long one. Yeah. Yeah, I don't remember. I picked that up somewhere at a thrift store or something. I would have picked it up because I knew it was the Pavement covered it. I wouldn't have picked it up intentionally for Echo and the Bunnymen. I came around on them a little bit later, but I think at a certain it probably came around on Echo and the Bunnymen around the same time that a lot of other music like that was being rediscovered or reevaluated and appreciated again anew in the early 2000s with bands like Echo and the Bunnymen and all the I think what people might call C86 bands, all that proto indie stuff from the UK. Lips Like Sugar, that's Echo and the Bunnymen. I never knew that.
Yeah, and Bring On the Dancing Horses.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, I like that song.
Okay.
How
about
did you know
the Cutter?
I don't know the Cutter.
Yeah, the Cutter, that one I know. I made lyrical reference to the Cutter in a song of mine once, literally using the word Cutter coming directly from the Echo and the Bunnymen song. I think Echo and the Bunnymen is another one where like all I really knew about them in the 90s before the Pavement cover was what I read about them probably in the Michael Azerrad Nirvana book. Talks about Courtney Love and her early days going to England and hanging out with those guys, trying to be a part of that scene.
It's funny that you bring that up because I think on that Celebrity Skin album, I think she talks about how Echo and the Bunnymen influenced her songwriting on that album, and I definitely hear it in that song Malibu. Not that I'm a huge Hole fan or expert on their music, but it seemed like there was a little bit of an Echo and the Bunnymen direction on that song.
Okay.
Did you know the chords of the song for Killing Moon were based on David Bowie's Space Odyssey, but played backwards?
I did not know that. Yeah, I think probably in 2001 with I was definitely way big into David Bowie at that time. I guess more so than Echo and the Bunnymen or any of the other music on the Donnie Darko soundtrack. So I think that like this is like Donnie Darko is a good point for me where like maybe some of my taste in music began to change. That's a good point for I think a lot of people's music was starting to change a little bit as well.
Yeah, I think it reintroduced the 80s as kind of not this, campy, super glammy sort of style of music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess with Tears for Fears and in Excess, there's still a little bit of that kind of glammy pop.
Yeah.
But obviously with like Joy Division and stuff. So like, there's a Tears for Fears cover that kind of became like a minor hit in the States, but actually gained a lot of traction in the UK. A cover of the Tears for Fears 1982 song Mad World.
Oh yeah.
And that is so I remember hearing the song, and I remember like seeing the credits like here and there. Like I don't know if it was like I was listening to like satellite radio one day and I saw Mad World by Gary Jules and Michael Andrews, and I guess because they sound like super generic names, I never really looked up who Michael Andrews was before we decided to sit down for this podcast. And Michael Andrews was actually part of a band in San Diego called the Gray Boy All Stars. So when I was in like middle school and high school, I would always see the Gray Boy All Stars playing like these local showcases with other bands. And I never really searched out to find their music, but like, they were always around in the local scene, like when I would read magazines and stuff. So it was very surprising to me to see anyone from that band, kind of move into, I guess, a film composer role. So, like, I don't think I've thought about the Gray Boy All-Stars since, like, 1998. And back then, he actually went under the name Elgin Park. So... Like, I think if I saw that Elgin Park was part of the Donnie Darko soundtrack, I would be like, that name's familiar, but, like, Michael Andrews is just another guy.
Oh, yeah. You don't really... That wouldn't register for me. Some guy with two first names that are pretty basic, yeah. But Elgin Park, yeah, that one might ring a bell. So what's the band called again? Gray Boy All Stars.
Gray Boy All Stars.
I'm picturing a pop punk kind of thing.
Like on Ill Communication when the Beastie Boys would kind of like do these like little funk instrumentals.
Oh yeah.
I kind of feel like the Gray Boy All Stars kind of made music like that, but like with the horn section.
Okay. Huh.
But that's only from like 5 songs on Spotify. As my research.
Okay. Yeah, I've never heard of them, but yeah, I was just trying to think of like what it might be at the time. Like like a post Sublime song that was like the Long Beach Dub All Stars. That's what it makes me think of as well.
Yeah, like it kind of sounds like it would fit in with like that ska punk scene of San Diego in the mid-90s, but I remember like they weren't just like another punk band. They weren't just like a second-rate Blink-182.
Mm-hmm.
But like I never knew enough about them to be able to say what they were.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew there was like the punk and ska scene, and then there were like more interesting bands in that local scene. And I think I mentally knew that like Grey Boy All Stars were in the more interesting section, but I just never really went out to buy any of their records.
Well, with that cover of Mad World, and I think just then using this music from the 80s unironically, except for maybe one use of music from the 80s in the film, and that's for the Sparkle Motion dance troupe. Don't want to give away too much about the movie if the listeners haven't seen it, but aside from maybe one ironic use of 1980s music, I mean, with the cover of Mad World and these other songs, I think that it was a maybe a refreshing kind of new way, and or looking back on the 80s in a different way. I know that, and I think that was part of my aversion to Echo and the Bunnymen, and maybe anything else, was that a good deal of the music I listened to when I was really starting to find my own music in the late 80s and early 90s was a lot of music that was turning its back on pop, in general, from that time. One of the first bands I got into became a super fan of was Nirvana, and I feel like that just kept me from really listening to a lot of music until I got older. I don't think that I would give certain things a chance because I knew it was from a time or a place that was just not cool to me. So I think that by 2001, I was willing to hear Duran Duran and other things like that with fresh ears. And like I said before, it was a little nostalgic for me, even though it wasn't the music that I was listening to per se in the 80s. But yeah, it was a good time. It's a good time to give things a re-listen. I think that, people are probably listening to bands from, the last 15 or 20 years with new ears now, maybe. I don't know.
I think a little bit. I can see that. Yeah, I think I had a similar experience. I think, like a band like New Order, I think I got the wrong impression of them because I would hear songs like Blue Monday, and I would just not, I just assumed that they were kind of cheesy, and, because I didn't take New Order seriously, I didn't get into Joy Division until later. And and I think you brought up, Duran Duran, right? I only knew like Rio and songs like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like songs like that you would think of as like definitely a joke of some kind. Like later, it's not to be taken. I mean, not that all music needs to be taken like seriously, but like when you hear like a song like Mad World being covered in maybe a little more serious of a way than it was even done in the first place, you're kind of forced to reevaluate things like that. But it's not exactly, a piano version of Rio. I don't know how seriously I'd take that.
Yeah. Like Mad World is such a I mean, I know it's 1980. It's a 1982 song, but Mad World is such like a huge different. Like it's such a different song than like the Tears for Fears that I think you would hear on the radio now. Like if they did like a throwback weekend or flashback weekend or whatever they call it, it'd be like Shout and Head Over Heels and
Yeah.
Everyone Wants to Rule the World, like kind of more fluff songs than Mad World, which is a very dark and depressing song.
Yeah, I think I may have heard it, but I listened to the original version in the last couple of days, and so yeah, it's good. I like it. Good video as well.
I don't think I've gone back to see the video, but
if you haven't seen it, but yeah, I think that I think that Donnie Darko and the soundtrack kind of started. It was either, I don't know if it was the zeitgeist or if it was, or it set the stage, or it was the beginning of a trend of reevaluating music from the late 70s, early mid 80s, like that. Obviously, the champions of which would be Joy Division and then New Order. So much that Sofia Coppola was using these bands. I know these bands started to creep into other movies. I mean, not to say that Donnie Darko, it's all because of Donnie Darko, and maybe it's just like after a certain amount of time, it's, maybe 20 or 30 years out, it's when you start to stuff starts to just seem fresh again. I don't know. But I remember Ceremony. I don't know if you talked about this, but I think they used Ceremony for the trailer for The Life Aquatic.
Did they?
Yeah, I believe Ceremony is in the trailer of Life Aquatic, but definitely does not appear in the film. But I wonder if that's sort of like it just seemed like it
totally don't remember that.
I'm almost certain that's true.
Like, I remember Starman being in the trailer, like So George's version of Starman. They had the Mark Mothersbaugh song that Bill Murray said that is playing in his head, the little Casio synth song.
Let's see. Yeah, I see. Well, I don't know if it's on. I see reference to it somewhere, but I can't find video proof. Maybe it's on the Blu-ray. But I see Life Aquatic. There's there's an article from like 2007. The missing music of Wes Anderson, The Life Aquatic. Something about using New Order's Ceremony in the trailer. I was chasing that song for a while too. I think that I remember. I think that song was used in. I want to say it was used in the Sofia Coppola movie Lost in Translation as well, to the best of my recollection. But I don't remember if it really was. No, it was in Marie Antoinette. Yeah, not Lost in Translation. Yeah.
Yeah, Lost in Translation was pretty much all Kevin Shields.
Right.
And then the Peaches song.
Right, but they used Jesus and Mary Chain.
Oh, right.
I think in Lost in Translation too. In the first decade of the 2000s, their movies started to let the 80s back into their soundtracks. At least the cool directors and the cool music supervisors were hip to that. And you had and you mentioned Peaches, right?
Yeah.
And Peaches and Fisher Spooner and Electro Clash and all of those things go along with that, I'd say. And for me, like one of my favorite albums from that time was Interpol's first album that came out in 2002, which might kind of fall into a similar place tone wise, I'd say, as maybe, or at least maybe they would hope that it would fall someplace similar, something that maybe Joy Division would do. or might feel that way, you know?
Jake Gyllenhaal is the star of the film, and I always have to bring up how, basically he started off as Bubble Boy. That was like one of his first big roles.
Bubble Boy.
Remember Bubble Boy?
What's a Bubble Boy? The boy in the bubble? I thought that was John Travolta.
Was that? I thought he was in Bubble Boy.
What's Bubble Boy?
It was a critically panned movie about a boy who lives on a bubble, but this was also in 2001. So actually, Jake Gyllenhaal. Sorry.
Go on.
Oh, Jake Gyllenhaal I had done some movies previously, like I think he's in October Sky, but I think this was like his first starring role, and it was basically this joke of a movie where he's the Bubble Boy, and I can't believe that came out the same year as Donnie Darko.
Bubble Boy, the Wayne Coyne story.
Did you know that
starring
he was
Jake
in City
Gyllenhaal.
Slickers?
No.
Apparently he was Danny Robbins in City Slickers.
I never saw or heard of him before Donnie Darko, that's for sure. I don't
think he had any major roles. Like, I don't know. Like, he was in October Sky, and I think Donnie Darko and Bubble Boy were like his first, I think, real starring roles. And Bubble Boy is, I guess, a 5.6 on IMDb. I thought it'd be lower. But the trailer or the poster for Bubble Boy says a journey of like 2,700 miles begins with a single bounce, and it shows him in a bubble.
Was it a comedy?
Yeah, it's supposed to be a very silly comedy, at least according to the poster. The synopsis says, Bubble Boy's been in a bubble all his life due to no immune system. A cute blonde girl befriends Bubble Boy. Her boyfriend proposes, and Bubble Boy decides to travel across the United States to Niagara Falls to stop the wedding. So I can't see that being particularly dramatic.
Odd. Maybe I'll check it out.
But that came out in the same year, Donnie Darko. I felt like it came out way before, but it's kind of insane that it's kind of crazy to me that he did what might be considered like one of the most awful movies in his filmography and one of the best movies in his filmography in the same year.
Okay, so that was a touchstone picture. I just love to see when things are touchstone pictures. Touchstone's Pictures proudly presents Bubble Boy.
Yeah, I just remember it being like a total...
Dustin Hoffman, Susan Sarandon. Wow. Oh no, that's a different movie.
Yeah, I was like, they were not
following Bubble Boy. I skipped ahead and then I skipped back. Oh, so he could have been Spider-Man. I could see that. I could have seen him as Spider-Man. Jake Gyllenhaal was. He could have been Spider-Man. I heard that.
Now he's just a Spider-Man bad guy.
Yeah, he was, wasn't he?
Yeah,
he was. That was good. That wasn't bad. I read somewhere that they were considering Jason Schwartzman for Donnie Darko.
I read that he was supposed to be Donnie Darko, but he had a scheduling conflict.
I wonder what that scheduling conflict was. I Heart Huckabees or something?
Possibly.
Maybe he had a Phantom Planet reunion tour lined up and
he doesn't do those.
He couldn't do that.
I'm pretty sure it was probably Wes Anderson related.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Yeah. Oh yeah, another good one from 2001 with a fantastic soundtrack. The Royal Tenenbaums, I think, came out that year as well.
No. Tenenbaums had to be like 2000. Was it 2001? Why did everything come out in 2001?
That's the last time I went to the movies. That's why.
Oh, that was 2001. For some reason, I felt like it was like 2003 or something.
I'm thinking like if I saw it in the theater, it was 2001. I do know and I would mention it before. I used to go to this weird theater. I don't even think it's probably there anymore. But I'm thinking, why did I have to go all the way out to this theater? I lived in Echo Park. I had to go all the way out to this theater in like West Hollywood or somewhere. And then I remembered that those were the days before the ArcLight or the Cinerama Dome had been reopened. And so as soon as that happened, you could go to the movies again without having to go all the way down there. But yeah, I saw every movie that year. I think that that was the year I went to the movies for sure. Yeah, I feel like Jake Gyllenhaal, although he, as far as I know, he never had a career in music. He was definitely, his look, and Donnie Darko, particularly during the party, toward the end of the film, became kind of the look of that product of the time that may or may not exist anymore, but the emo guy. So the emo guy look, I feel like came from Donnie Darko in that party scene with the, when Donnie Darko was going to get up to no good, he would flip up his hood like he was going to do something. So he had the hoodie, he had kind of like the bangs cut a little bit, not quite the Spock rock cut, but very, very close. And the just the overall dark mood vibe that I feel like was inspiring to many an emo dude of the early 2000s. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's interesting how emo fashion and kind of emo music evolved from like the mid to late 90s to the early 2000s and beyond. Because I remember like emo music in like 97 was like, it kind of sounded like pop punk, but like they would like slow things down in the bridge. And people who listened to emo music were like kind of preppy dressed, because they weren't like the pop punk meatheads.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is just San Diego because Blink-182 was blowing up at the time. But I mean, that was my thoughts of emo, was like bands like the Get Up Kids and the Promise Ring. And
sure.
then like around the 2001, like emo became like much more brooding and a lot more screaming.
Oh yeah,
like,
maybe I'm thinking of the screamo, maybe more of the the post emo stuff. When everyone thinks about emo, they think about like the kind of brooding sort of, I guess you would say, Jake Gyllenhaal and Donnie Darko or Tobey Maguire in Spider-Man 3 sort of look. Yeah, for sure.
And then as it became more screamo, then they started adding like mascara and stuff.
Yeah. Then you throw Jordan Catalano into the mix.
Right.
Then it's a whole nother thing. Yeah, emo to me was like, I don't know, maybe like Fugazi or something in the early 2000s, if you might catch somebody using that term. And then I thought that like somebody that was like really like content wise, that was like really an emo guy, would have been like, to me, Lou Barlow from Sebado would be like emo, like emotional, like what I thought like it meant like emotion, like it was short for emotional hardcore. So it would have come from like the hardcore scene of the 80s, but then with like, the kind of lyrical content that you might hear from like a Lou Barlow or something like that.
Right, like that's like Sunny Day Real Estate.
Yeah, that's about right for me. Yeah. But yeah, the Get Up Kids and the Promise Ring, those were, yeah, like more like intelligent pop punk stuff that I think was definitely, Converse and sweaters instead of like board shorts and tank tops.
Right.
Kind of music.
It's weird to me how like emo fashion kind of moved, like everyone just thinks of it as like, kind of the brooding weird haircut and a hoodie when it was much different a few years earlier.
Mm-hmm. I gotta say that I think that the hoodie's all from Donnie Darko.
Oh, I believe that.
No. And speaking of Donnie Darko's hoodie, a little aside into the film, maybe not so much about the music, but I feel like this is one of the first real, like, I mean, this is a movie set in the 80s, so they got to do a couple of nods to some 80s films or something, not to hit you over the head with it per se, but there's a scene in Donnie Darko where you've got 4 kids on bikes. One of them's Donnie Darko with his hood up. I can't help but think of E.T. when I see that. And it does help that Drew Barrymore is in this movie. So there's kind of like an E.T. thing going. Maybe if only briefly. I mean, this film's probably not all too inspired by E.T. Albeit, I feel like maybe the conversations, how like Spielberg with E.T. would kind of get those conversations going, around the table, and they kind of felt genuine. You had like real things going on, kind of like in a there was just like the feeling that like he was just capturing something as it was happening. And I think that I'd like to think that the director here, what's his name, Richard Kelly,
yeah,
I think he did a good job with that. And it probably helps that the Gyllenhaals were actually siblings, so it adds a little realism to that. But yeah, it's good. Can we talk about Jenna Malone real quick?
Oh yeah, sure.
All right. Have you heard Jenna Malone of Donnie Darko, her music? Did she had it seems like she had a short-lived band, or she's put out some music here and there over the last 19 years, but she had a band out there in about 2004. Are you aware of that one?
I had no idea.
Oh yeah, Jenna Malone and the Bloodstains. I know I followed her on MySpace back then. I was in a band right at this time, and I remember hearing that Jenna Malone had a band. Jenna Malone from Donnie Darko and her Bloodstains, and this is a hard one. I think that this is self-released stuff. It was on her MySpace page. Probably it only exists in like MP3 or CDR form, so it's not on your Spotify's or any of that, but it's out there. Indie stuff. If you're able, take a listen. I think you can find it on YouTube, but I don't know if most people know that she did that stuff.
Yeah, I see it on her Wikipedia page, and apparently she got reviewed in Pitchfork.
Well,
and Pitchfork says it's pretty out there.
Okay. I, for one, don't recall what it sounds like, but I know it exists.
Yeah,
and
the exact
that was
quote.
The time.
I was gonna say the Pitchfork review says the music is pretty out there, bedroom electronics, spaced out keyboards, and Malone's spare vocals.
Maybe worth checking out.
Yeah, maybe.
So what's your favorite metal band of the 80s?
Of the 80s?
Of the 1980s.
Man, I mean, I wasn't really I didn't get into metal until much later. So it's hard for me to say I had a favorite 80s metal band because it would be, retroactive, but
Okay, so during the 80s you weren't into metal. I don't think that I was either. But
is Iron
if
Maiden
I were
considered 80s?
What is it?
Is Iron Maiden considered 80s?
Oh yeah.
I guess it would be them. My old roommate took me to one of their shows because he had an extra ticket and I had a good time.
Well, have you ever heard of the Dead Green Mummies?
I have not heard of the Dead Green Mummies.
Well, neither have I, but apparently they provided a song for the Donnie Darko soundtrack called Proud to Be Loud. But in fact, the Dead Green Mummies don't really exist. It is a fictitious name. The real Dead Green Mummies is a band that some might be familiar with called Pantera.
Oh. So Pantera used like a fake band name?
So sounds like Pantera wanted to distance themselves from their early stuff. Maybe it wasn't it was too glam, too hair metal, something like that. So when it came time, when they got the request to add one of their songs to the soundtrack, they didn't want their name attached to it, so they submitted a fake name, so no one would know that it was Pantera.
So thanks, Damon, for stopping by the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure, Ryan. Thank you for having me back. And I look forward to more awesome Soundtrack Your Lives for Season 2.
Yeah, you can visit our website at www.soundtrackyourlife.net. You can find playlists based off the songs that we talk about or the artists that we talk about in each episode. Damon curates those for us. So thank you so much, Damon, and we'll do this again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us this week on Soundtrack Your Life. Make sure to visit our website, soundtrackyourlife.net, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a rating. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too.